You know that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup? Well, today's guest absolutely filled my soul with so much love and joy that after we were done talking, I felt like I could finally breathe again. Hannah Serapiglia is a friend of mine from college who just opened her own homemade pottery store called Willow and Vessel. Like so many of us, she never thought this would be a chapter in her life, and yet here she is, totally creating a life she loves while also dealing with anxiety, depression, and ADHD. Her words of wisdom and the insight she has gleaned from pottery will bring you so much joy. I'm just ecstatic for you to finally meet her. Welcome to Drawn, the podcast that draws you in with stories of hope, healing, and even a little hustle while battling anxiety and depression. Think you have to wait until you've conquered your mental illness to start living a joyful, meaningful life? Think again. Conquering your mental illness is part of living a life you love, and we're going to figure it out together. I'm Katie Rashedko, and this is Drawn. Hannah, hey, it is so good to hear from you. Thank you for being on the Drawn podcast.
Hello, I'm so excited. I'm just glad to be able to catch up with you as a friend and then also get to be part of this because I think it's so cool.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because obviously you are somebody that I think we basically have followed each other on social media with both of our different types of like mental health projects kind of from the beginning, and I love that because we're growing kind of in sync with each other. We both kind of started at the same time and we're figuring out this whole new social media world together, which is really exciting.
Everything from graduating college together to figuring out post-college life.
Yes, to having really cool. Best friends from college who, married each of us. So it's like, it's cool that Kevin and Sam, they stay in touch, we stay in touch. It's great. Fun fact, you're actually still Hannah Whitehead in my phone.
That's so funny. You are still Katie Rashedko in my phone.
I love it.
Yep. When I gave you my number earlier, I was like, I'm pretty sure she has mine, and I'm pretty sure I have hers, but I'm just going to give it to her. And I didn't even check, and lo and behold.
So obviously, I know that you have been very open about your mental health journey on social media, which is so powerful. I love the idea of being able to share our stories. But I want to start off by, first of all, just asking you, how are you doing today? Like, one being like the worst, you think about running your car off the side of the road, or like 10 being like magical Disney World bliss.
Yeah, I'm at about like a 7 today. And honestly, today is a high compared to the last couple months. It's been rough, just with like being in some like personal transitional seasons and having some new responsibilities at work. So the overwhelm has been real. But today, I actually got the things done that I told myself I was going to get done. I took 20 minutes to sit out in the sun because it's gorgeous and 85 degrees. So today I'm at a 7. So
well, that makes me happy. That is really good. And I think it's important to ask that question because one of the biggest stigmas that I've had to fight about mental health is that, if you have depression or anxiety, then you're always depressed and you're always anxious. And people don't realize the ups and downs and the roller coasters, and that you can have really, really good days and still have depression,
Yes, and it's unless you experience it, it's really hard to explain. It is that it can constantly be there, but sometimes it makes itself known and sometimes it kind of fades in the background. And there's different things that might cause it to pop up, or it might just decide, hey, I'm gonna take center stage right now for no reason. So yeah, it's a daily challenge for sure.
Yeah, and you said it right, for no reason. Sometimes there's not even a trigger for why I feel like it's the end of the world and it's all my fault. It's not just okay that it's it's the end of the world and I just got to be passive in it. I genuinely feel the world's falling apart and it's my fault that it is. So and you're like, why do you feel that way? And I was like, I don't know, I just do.
Yeah, and it's so hard to address a problem where you don't know what the cause is. I think like that's kind of the way a lot of our brains like in today's society goes, like, well, if there's a problem, then find the solution. And it's so hard with mental health because it's not just like cut and dry like that. Like, it's not like there is just like a one thing to cure everything, you know? So yeah, it's definitely a different way of thinking when you start talking about like mental health and how it changes from day to day.
Yeah, definitely. And we are going to get into all of that. So, what I'd really like to do right now is just kind of open the podcast up to you to first talk about Willow and Vessel, because that new business venture of yours is beautiful. So, tell us what that is.
Thank you. Yeah, Willow and Vessel Pottery is like my next entrepreneurial venture, out of many that I feel like I've had so far. It's been a whirlwind. I kind of stumbled upon pottery accidentally in 2019, which I assume we'll probably get into in more detail. But yeah, I kind of like stumbled into it and just like was hooked, totally fell in love. So then over the last year and a half or so, I've just been taking classes in my community, watching lots of YouTube videos, and so I knew pretty early on, even before I could really make anything good, that like I want to have my own pottery business, functional pieces, just have like a business where I can create what is on my mind, versus like when I was a photographer before this, which was great for my creativity, but it was a lot of like performing, and trying to like sell myself and my services to people, and it was causing me a lot of anxiety and it just wasn't working for me. But with pottery, I can kind of make what I want to make and then just put it out there. And there's no performing or having to meet someone's expectations. Like, if people want to buy my stuff, they can. And if they don't want to, they don't have to. And I don't, like, it doesn't cause me any anxiety. So, so Willow and Vessel, the name, I kind of got it from, a willow tree is typically in history has been an image of transition and going with the flow because of their flexible branches. They're also really durable, and they can resist a lot of stress and change. So they're kind of a symbol of resiliency. So I knew I wanted to include willow in the name. And then vessel is obviously a pottery term, but it also kind of reminds me of coming from a Christian worldview and faith being a big part of my life and who I am. It just reminds me of some Bible verses talking about us as people being the vessel and God being the potter, and him like forming us. So I knew like I wanted to kind of incorporate those two things. So that's kind of where the name came out of. And yeah, I could go on all day. So
please do, because seriously, I had no idea that was how you came up with the name. I remember when you had posted on social media, you were asking around, asking about a bunch of different names, kind of putting it out there to see what people liked. And then, of course, you know, your logos, you were kind of changing that up a little bit. But the story behind the name just makes me fall in love with your company even more, because I think that's so true. And I never heard that description about willow trees, which I freaking love willow trees. So that kind of description has just made me fall in love with them even more.
Yeah, and I honestly, I've never really told the full story, because I did do those like Instagram polls and everything, but yeah, I should probably do that.
I think you should. I think you should. I think like that, because it's so much the heart of you as a person and as a creator, but then also your company, that just like, it's beautiful. Like, you definitely need to let people know a little bit more about that story. So one of the things that you did say that was really interesting, though, is that you didn't like the performance aspect of photography. But when I knew you in college, you were a music major, you're a beautiful singer. So the idea of you not liking to perform, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around, because that's what you used to do. So let's go back to college and kind of that side of your artistic creativity with music, and kind of how did that evolve and how did that change?
Yeah. So it's really funny that you mentioned that, because a lot of like my family and people that have known me for a long time, they'll say the same thing. Like, but you're great in front of people, and I have been in venues of thousands of people, like on a stage, and I honestly look back and I'm like, how the am I allowed to curse? How the hell did I do that? Like,
Curse away.
okay. um but I guess, like, and I'm gonna try really hard to be eloquent in how I'm talking and not just like going all over the place. But music was something that from a young age I was really drawn to. Loved singing, loved writing and writing songs. So it was kind of like a natural progression. My parents got me into doing musical theater and talent shows and all this stuff. And then eventually that led to me majoring in music and songwriting when I was in college. So I kind of just followed that natural trajectory, and I did genuinely enjoy music, and I really did enjoy performing, and the like adrenaline and the expression of like getting to express emotions and stuff like that in front of people. I will say one thing, even for an introvert, it's much easier to like get up on stage and do something to like in front of an audience, because there's this separation that happens, I think, where if I'm walking into a room full of people where I have to talk to them, that is terrifying to me. But if I'm asked to like get on a stage where people are just watching and I don't need to be like necessarily interacting back and forth with them, I can do whatever you want on that stage. It's like this weird separation, I think mentally, that I've always had. So that's why I think I was able to stick with music and performance and acting and all of that stuff for so long. But honestly, even while I was pursuing that, and in college, it started to come out more, like I started to understand it more, that I was definitely struggling with the performance anxiety. And it was taking a lot of my joy away from actually pursuing it. I also didn't like the like comparison and the competition. With musical theater, like I was basically up against every other 5'3" brunette girl, so if there was one that was prettier than me or a better voice than me, like I really felt that, like, the whole auditioning aspect of things, gosh, like that was just the comparison game and all of that came with music and performance. It was more toxic than helpful for me. So by the time I finished school, I was just so burnt out. And I got a desk job, a 9 to 5 at the university, immediately after graduating, because I had like $500 in my bank account, and my parents' financial support was basically being cut off. So I got the job I had to have. And I mean, as we probably all know, as the story goes, for music majors and performers, there's not really tons of jobs out there. So, and I didn't really have the drive to like move to Nashville or LA or New York and really put myself out there, just because of all the things I was feeling that I didn't really have a name for yet. So, so that kind of like, that was honestly, that anxiety was kind of like the nail in the coffin for me really supporting that as like a career.
Wow, that's really powerful. So thank you first of all for saying that, because just you telling your story has already like encouraged me, because so
Oh,
many times I think we feel like we're the only ones struggling with that post college woulda shoulda couldas, but then also feeling burnout and like, okay, if I can't hack it when I'm 23, 24 years old out of college, because I'm already burned out, what kind of future do I have for myself? Because
yeah.
who burns out at 24 years old? At least those were the thoughts that were circling through my head.
Oh, me too. I was like, I got to the end of, I was sitting there at commencement, and I was just like, I just spent 4 years and I'm in debt for this degree that, like, I wholeheartedly thought this was my calling, as people want to like say, and now I'm sitting here just completely exhausted, getting ready to start a 9 to 5 desk job that doesn't excite me at all, and I'm like, this is it. Like, I don't have any. I can't and I don't think anything. These things are actually true, but the thoughts that were going through my head were, that was my shot. I just blew my shot. My entire life is now determined by the wrong major that I was in for 4 years, and just all of these like catastrophic thoughts, like nothing will ever change now. This was my peak. Now I'm like blah blah blah, like, and then the thought spiral just like starts to go. And so yeah, no, I totally hear you.
Mm-hmm.
You're not alone. Like, and I think it impacts, the more I talk to people about it, the more people actually feel like that when they're sitting there on their graduation day. So I think we have to talk about it more. And I also think the education system has to change, because we're told as 18-year-olds that we have to go to college, make this huge financial and time commitment, and pick a major that is going to determine our career path. I just think, I mean, tell me, like, when you were 18, were you the same person you are now? I would say probably not. Like,
Nope. I mean, to be honest, I started at 18 years old as a musical theater major in college because I also thought that I was going to be the next Broadway star. Yes. So, the fact that I'm here now hosting a mental health podcast, working as a reporter in a little local news TV station, like, never in a million years would have crossed my mind at 18.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. But, I mean, you're doing amazing and incredible things. But yes, but if you had told, like, 18-year-old Katie, she would have been like, what the heck?
Right.
Yes.
Like,
same with me.
Yes, but here's what I find very interesting is that there's this quote that I love by Ed Catmull, who is kind of like the founder and CEO of Pixar. And he said that you hold tightly to your intentions, but loosely to your goals. And what I have realized in kind of this retrospective, kind of looking inward journey that I've had over the last several years is that where I'm at right now really truly aligns with everything I loved about musical theater. So in a weird way, it's like my intentions have always stayed the same, in that, like, I'm a storyteller and I love telling stories and I love listening to people tell their stories. But instead of doing that on the stage as a performance and in the musical theater world, I'm now doing that as a reporter telling news stories, or as a podcast host talking to people about their journey through mental health. And what's really weird is that idea of just like God was grooming me all along for exactly where I'm at right now. But like you said, never in a million years would I have thought this is where I would end up in 2021.
Yes, I love that. And that's exactly, when you said that, like, your intentions stayed the same. When I think of you, I think of storyteller, like, advocate, and you can do that with so many mediums. Like, it doesn't have to be one thing.
Exactly.
And I've definitely found that in my experience too. It's like, I think we need to give ourselves permission for, like, what we do to change, and to give ourselves the flexibility that, like, we're like, the world is kind of turning away from the, you find your one job and that's what you do until you retire at 65. Like, that's just not the way that humans work, or that the world needs to work. So I love that. I love that quote.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend it. I have it written down on so many different areas in my house, and it's just something that I absolutely love. But I do agree with you. I think we need to start getting away from this idea that changing your mind is the same thing as quitting, or that adjusting course is the same thing as failure.
Exactly. Yeah.
And as a performance anxiety person like yourself, and I am that way too, feeling like I couldn't hack it as a musical theater major, or feeling like I was failing a class, or even when I was graduating from college and applying for jobs and not getting the jobs that I thought I was surely qualified for, every single one of those felt like such a huge failure. When at the
Yes.
same time,
Yeah.
I was like, no, it's all in preparation for where I am now. But at the time, obviously, you don't have the luxury of hindsight. So it's really, really
Hmm.
hard to not hold your self worth and tie it to all of those rejection letters.
Yes, yeah. I actually have written down in front of me, like I have just kind of like a note page to of things in case I like was drawing a blank with you. And I labeled it things working with clay has taught me, and one of them is that failure is beautiful and necessary. And I think um like that's kind of what the whole like changing career paths or whatever, when we feel like this is not working for me anymore, I need to change directions. It can really feel like failure, like, well, I couldn't like stay in this for the long haul, so it's something wrong with me. And yeah, and I just think, no, like this was just a step to your next like chapter,
Yeah.
and this phase of your life prepared you for the next. And like life isn't just like a straight line. Like there's a lot of steps that go into you becoming who God created you to be. And you have to enjoy like the journey of it, and not be like, well, I have to get to this point and then I will have made it, like, because then you'll always be chasing that, like, oh, I just need to like achieve this and then I will be a person. You know what I mean? Like, I
I will
definitely
be
feel that.
successful. Like that's the thing that
Yes.
I really struggle with is like if I do this, then I'll be successful. And then as
Right.
soon as I do that, it's like, nope, wasn't good enough. I've got to do this now in order to be successful. So
Yes.
I have imposter syndrome really bad. So even when there is something that I do that might actually genuinely be successful, I have the feeling that I kind of lucked into it, or that it
Mhm.
wasn't actually any of my own hard work. It was the team effort, even though I know that I did all of the work, or at least most of it, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. That luck factor played a role into why I was successful, and that's why I can't actually take pride in what I accomplished because it was me just kind of stumbling into it rather than actually earning it.
Right. Like you start to think this was just a fluke and I'm not going to be able to repeat that same success. And then it's
Yes.
just like you can't even enjoy the the like victory moments.
Exactly, yes. Because how many, like, well intentioned people have come up to you, since you graduated and said, well, weren't you a music major? Why aren't you singing
Oh,
anymore?
oh girl, yes.
Yep.
I hate the small talk question of, so what are you doing now? I
Oh my
hate that.
gosh,
I still
yes.
hate it. Like, I still feel embarrassed. I hate to say this, but I'm just going to be honest. Like, I still feel embarrassed when people are like, so what do you do? And I'm like, I do pottery. I play with mud. And then the questions do come up. Well, weren't you doing photography, or weren't you doing music, or X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, yes, I was, but I'm not anymore, and I wasn't anymore. Yes, like it's just like it's really hard to
Yes.
have to be like kind to yourself when you're like going in between so many different things.
Yes, there
Yeah.
is a person that I follow on social media. Her name is Jordan Lee Dooley, and she is a very big advocate for multi-passionate people. And I
Mm,
love that because they're like, I'm that way too, where I kind of feel like I have chameleon interests, where I am doing a lot of different things at the same time. Like I genuinely love my job as a TV news reporter, and I could see myself doing that full time as a career for the rest of my life. But then I also, here I am, like I want to kind of get certificates in life coaching and mental health and stuff like that. And I have this
yeah.
podcast and this blog and all this stuff, which I also do just kind of for fun. But then I also think, okay, well, I also want to be like a public speaker and really be able to take, the show on the road, as they say, and be able to talk to people face to face about mental health and our stories and all that stuff. But it's just kind of one of those things where it's like we just have so many different interests, and yet people
Yes.
have a hard time wrapping their mind around that people can be more than one thing. Does that make
Oh,
sense? Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, I completely feel that. And I luckily my family has been pretty supportive of my like transitions over the years between different things, but it can be really hard like for people going through this, like other people are not always kind about it, and they're not always supportive, and sometimes you do get like the comments like, well, that's a hobby, that's not a like life job, like that's not a calling or a role, like you do that on the side and then you work your job, and your job isn't fun, and you just have to be okay with that. And to me, I'm like, no, like that's not the way I want to live. Like your job should be enjoyable. Yes, of course there's going to be like cons and downsides to any job, of course, but like I just feel like we need to let ourselves be creative and have fun. And if we want to make a job that feels like you're just like playing in mud, which is essentially what mine is, then just do it. Like you can do it.
Absolutely.
I want people to know that.
Yeah. And obviously, I mean, we've talked about being multi-passionate and stuff, and you've mentioned that you still love music, and I'm sure you still like photography and stuff, even if it's not where your sole focus is. But kind of throughout the, like, all of your transitions, you've always had this element of art and creativity and creating something, whether it's performing a song, creating a song that's beautiful for people to listen to, or photographs, or now pottery. Art has always been something that's like a huge part of your life, right?
Yeah, I mean, since I was a toddler, I was always imaginative, and I was always writing stories and poetry and playing make believe and drawing, and then just as I got older, like I've dabbled in so many random things, like I can't even tell you. I picked up embroidery randomly over quarantine in 2020. Like you're so right. Like I have just always kind of been a person that just needs to make things and express emotion through like creativity and that sort of thing. So that really has been like a huge role in my life since I can remember.
Right. So growing up, I'm sure art was kind of a way to help you express yourself. But what was your childhood like, if you don't mind me asking? And how did art play a role in that? And maybe even like if it was the same for you as it was for me, it really was an escape from some of the negative things I was feeling or whatever. I could really just dive into art, whether it was rehearsals or it was drawing and painting and stuff. So I'm curious for you, growing up, what was little Hannah like and what challenges did she face? And then how did she find really like therapy in art, even if you didn't know that that's what it was?
Yeah, great question. I have an amazing family, and I am so close with my immediate and extended family, and they're amazing. At the same time, I did grow up with divorced parents. My mom and dad divorced when I was 3, and my little brother was like 1.5, 2. So I do have some memories of when they were still together, but essentially for my entire life they've been divorced. And then my dad remarried when I was 6. So then I had a blended family situation. She had my stepmother has a couple kids with my dad, so I had a couple more siblings then throughout the years. So just as kind of like a broad look, obviously that has impacted me throughout my life. I pretty much from as early as I can remember had issues with anxiety. I also have ADHD, which I haven't really talked about much. I literally just got diagnosed 6 months ago or so.
Wow.
But that's something that you have your whole, like from birth. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder. So I did not know that I had that, but ADHD in women often goes undiagnosed, especially inattentive type, which I am. So and that has a high likelihood of being paired with generalized anxiety, which I also have. So so these two things, these two like mental health issues were really shaping me from, a very young age, but I didn't have any words for them, and it was pretty unnoticed by parents and teachers and friends even. Some adults in my life would kind of joke around, oh, Hannah's just a worrywart. Like, just don't worry about it, Hannah. Like, I can remember being called a worrywart, like, just in jest, as young as, like, a 5-year-old. Like, so I thought that it was my fault that I had anxiety, that I needed to just not be anxious, and I didn't know how to do that. And some things that I was feeling, I didn't even recognize that they were anxiety. So I definitely escaped into my room for long periods of time as a child, even up through my teen years, and would spend hours acting scenes out with my Barbies, or writing entire like little books, which I still have some of. I've kept journals since I was in like 2nd grade, and I just filled journals my entire life, and have kept them. So it's really interesting to read back. But yeah, like, so and kind of like we were saying before, like, how I've expressed that creativity changed through different stages of my life. I got more into music and theater and acting in my teen years. And so that was kind of my main outlet then. And then that has just kind of slowly changed and evolved as I've gotten older.
The question that I really want to follow up with is faith. You mentioned at the very beginning kind of being a part of your story as well. And was faith incorporated in your childhood, or is that something you found later in life?
I grew up in a Christian home where I was, taught Christian principles, and Bible stories were a part of everyday life. Church was a part of my life every week. And I definitely, even as a little girl, before I even really understood what it meant to have faith in Jesus and all of that stuff, like, I definitely used that, like, Bible stories and things like that to, like, comfort my anxiety. So that was definitely a huge role in, like, helping me cope with things that I didn't even know, like, the name for. And by the time I was 11, I really, like, had an experience where I was like, this, like, I want to, commit my life to Christ. And that's really when I believe that, like, I had my, like, salvation moment, as, like, a lot of people will ask you about, like, when did you accept Jesus into your heart? And it's like, well, I've always believed he was there and believed he was my savior, but I really think that, like, at 11 was when it really clicked for me. And I think also, like, for anyone else that's listening that is in the Christian worldview and in the church, like, accepting Christ didn't get rid of my anxiety or my ADHD, which is a brain thing, or, any of the problems in my life, but it definitely gives hope and healing, and it gives you that, like, strength. You can draw strength from it to keep going, instead of falling into despair. So that was has been a big part of my life, and my family's life. So yeah, wow. I'm very grateful for that.
Wow, that's amazing and beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, because I can remember distinctly the moment that my mental breakdown kind of reached its peak when I was about, probably must have been 26 or so, and I had just started a new job, and I had just gotten married, and I'd moved away from the church that I'd been going to for almost 9 years, and there was just all of these, like, major changes in my life that, despite the fact that I know they were good changes, were still change, and it was still very hard, and it was very overwhelming. And I remember this moment. I was driving for work and I was on my way to go do an interview, and I was on the Blue Ridge Parkway, and I just had this thought that I could drive my car off the side of this cliff
Mm,
and no one would know, and that would be okay, and I would probably be better off for it. The world would be better off for it.
mm,
And there was just this thought of just so, like, everything just felt so wrong in my life, despite the fact that everything was going so right. So there was that conflict of just like, well, if everything's going so good and I still feel this way, there must be something wrong with me. I need a do over.
yeah,
Maybe, what's it called? Reincarnation is a thing, and I can come back and try again.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
remember thinking that, and all of a sudden, this voice that I know was the voice of God just said, don't.
yeah,
And
yeah,
when I think about people who don't have that kind of faith holding them to this world, I can 100% understand and realize that the pain, it must be so great that they
yeah,
just want to end everything and they don't have that voice telling them don't. And that
yeah,
breaks my heart because faith is also such an important part of my life. And I think faith comes in a bunch of different ways and in varieties and stuff. And I think God uses faith through a lot of different mediums, even, to help people
yeah,
feel connected to Him and stuff. And so when people don't have that, it's very easy to understand then why they
yeah.
hurt so bad. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so glad that you did not do that and
Yeah.
that you're here. But
Um,
yeah, like I think sometimes when I think about that and that there are people in the world that don't have that faith, like I don't know how anyone survives anything.
yeah. Oh my gosh, so
You know,
true.
like I sometimes it can be hard to survive even when you do have that faith, you know, like so I just, yeah,
Yeah. Especially
that's
with
a
faith too,
big thing.
like the church, and you and I both, we grew up in the church. We love the church and
Hmm.
all that it has done for us. But the one thing that I think the church has really done poorly is helping Christians understand mental health in
Oh yeah,
how it through the lens of faith, because I remember also kind of being the anxiety person, the worry ward, and people telling me that you just got to pray a little harder. You
yep,
just got to trust God a little more. You
yeah,
must not be trusting God if you're this worried. I was like, oh,
yeah,
I'm a bad Christian because I am worried. I do have anxiety about this. I do know in my head that God is in control, but I'm still shaking in my boots, and
yeah,
I must be
yeah,
so then add on to that, fear of failure, performance
and then
anxiety,
guilt,
and the
yeah,
guilt of just like, well, here I am, I'm trying to be the best Christian I can possibly be. I'm looking and comparing myself to all these other Christians who don't seem worried about anything because they must truly believe that God's got this, and
yeah,
now I feel like a failure in my own faith. And as soon as you feel
yeah,
that, like, that can be a crippling thing because faith is so foundational. Your whole
hmm,
core gets rattled when you're like, who am I now if I am not a Christian, if I am not the Christian that everyone thinks I am? Like, how do
yeah,
you wrap your identity around that? So when I graduated college and everything kind of was almost feeling like it was falling apart, that
yeah,
that was what I kept coming back to, is that, like, who am I? Because I'm
yeah,
not the person I thought I was, and I'm definitely not the people think I am. And that was really
yeah.
hard.
Yeah, oh my goodness. It's so true. And I agree. I think the church has um, definitely trivialized mental health issues. And I think I mean, I remember learning that anxiety was actually a sin. And
Mm-hmm.
I think anxiety is really a result of the fallen sin nature. I don't think it's like you're a bad person because you have anxiety. Like, it's part of living in a fallen world, and it's not God's will for us to have anxiety. But the Bible doesn't say if you're anxious, you're a sinner. It says if you're anxious, bring it to God.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say like, you know, that you need to be condemned for this. It's something that God wants to meet us in, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like that was taught enough. And Um, I think also it's been pretty like ignored that there are physiological part elements to mental health, and the psychological is real, and like, and it's not just like a mind thing and a thought thing. It's your whole body is involved in it, your hormones, your what's going on in your brain, the trauma that you experience. Like, it's not just a renew your mind issue. It's a whole body issue, and some of it, most of it, is not really in our control. So, I just don't think it's been addressed appropriately, but I do have hope, and I think that a corner is kind of turning in that.
Yeah, definitely. So now I'm curious, is how did you go from, your desk job after college when everything kind of felt like it was falling apart and you didn't know what you were going to do, to where you are now? Because it's been what, like,
Yeah.
how long has it been since we graduated?
Gosh,
5 years?
is it 7
Six?
years?
7? Oh my gosh, 7 years. Wow.
No, wait. I think it's 2014. Oh my gosh, yeah, to 2021.
Oh my gosh, we're old.
I'm really bad at math, but I'm pretty sure that's 7.
I'm pretty sure that's
God.
7. So, 7 years now. How, like, what has the last 7 years? How did you get from being where you were after college to where you are now, especially when it comes to your mental health? Like, what was that journey like?
So, from about 2014 when I graduated through probably beginning of 2016, end of 2015 was probably like the lowest point in my life. It was the first time that like I really dealt with like chronic depression. I'd always dealt with anxiety, but like depression is different. Like, and it's almost like a Venn diagram. Like, there's a lot of similarities between them, but there is like this like despair and just like darkness and heaviness over your entire life that happens when you're depressed, which I know you've experienced too. So I had never felt that. Like, anxiety feels like a very like familiar friend to me. Like, it's always been there. We are well acquainted. I have known anxiety since I was 1. Like, but depression was like this new person that came into my life when I was put behind a desk at a 9 to 5. So kind of went into a steady decline over 2014 into 2015, where classic with depression, nothing that had interested me did anymore. I basically worked, hated it the whole time, came home exhausted, cried, felt like I didn't have anyone in the world, went to bed, and then woke up the next day and did it all over again. My relationships really suffered.
Because when did you get married?
2017.
Okay.
So I was dating Kevin through all of this, and I mean, he was a trooper through all of it. Like, we didn't have a ton of like quality time together throughout our dating relationship, just because of his job and mine. Like, we're totally opposite schedules. And like, every relationship, has, communication barriers and conflicts that you have to get through anyway. But then like add on top of that, just work lives that did not match up. And then I was going through this like severe like mental health like crisis, and he didn't know what to do about it, and I didn't know what to do about it. So it was just a lot of days just like us hanging out, and I just wasn't me, and like I was crying and weeping every time like we had to say goodbye, and just feeling and it was a lot of things. It was my work environment not being conducive for who I was as a person. So like I wasn't like utilizing my gifts or my interests.
Because it wasn't a very like creative job. You didn't have a creative outlet.
No, I was on a phone, which was also like terrifying to me. It was like a job that gave me anxiety and also like completely drained me of any creativity. Like, so it was like a double whammy, because it was just literally being on a phone with students all day, handling issues, being talked to badly, and and then being micromanaged at work, and it not being a great work environment either. So yeah, so like that part of my life felt like everything was going wrong, and then being at the time that I was truly like away from where I grew up, like I started to really, I feel like the impact of growing up in a divorced household and all of that was like kind of crashing in on me because I had never dealt with it, had never had therapy or anything. So that was crashing in on me. And then just feeling so isolated, which partially was my environment was isolating me. But then when I became depressed, I isolated myself even further.
Yeah.
So it was like, it was just a whirlwind.
That classic phrase, when it rains, it pours. Like
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
just happened all at once.
Oh yeah, it was. I was just like, oh, this must be what. Eventually, I was like, this must be what people say when they say like they're depressed.
Yeah. You knew. Like, you're like,
Yeah,
oh, something is definitely
yeah,
not right. So did you go
yeah.
and get like an actual diagnosis from like a doctor or a therapist at all, like at this point?
So I started having like intrusive thoughts about kind of like you said, like you were driving on the parkway and like had this thought about just driving off. I started to have thoughts like when I would go to bed at night, like I was almost like praying to God, like, can you just not wake me up? Like, can I just fall asleep and just stay asleep? Like,
Yes.
and those thoughts started to scare me because like I was never at the point where I was going to do anything about it, but I was like, but this is that door opening. Like, if I'm having the thought, what's the next step to that? So when that started to happen, I sought help from a therapist. I went to a Christian counselor, um, and we really delved into like codependency issues, issues from my childhood, trauma from childhood. Um, and she really started to like help me do the work with like dealing with past stuff. And at one point, I saw her for about 6 months or so. And she, at one point in our sessions, was like, what do you do for fun? Like, what do you do for you? Like, what are your hobbies? And I suddenly realized, like, I don't have any anymore. Like, I wasn't writing anything. I wasn't journaling. I wasn't doing music. I wasn't drawing I wasn't having any kind of creative outlet. And I was like, I need to figure out like who I am again, like, and so that was probably 2016 when I started to be like, okay, I'm going to look into, like, I just started researching everything. I bought like tons of oil paints and like paint stuff, never actually learned, but I bought it.
You tried.
But like it was me trying. I wouldn't have been done that like a year earlier. So, I am a huge advocate for going to therapy, going to counseling. I was never, to answer your question, I was never diagnosed with anxiety or depression or ADHD at that point. So I just thought I just have stuff I have to get through, and then like get some hobbies, get out of this job, and then I'll be good. That was kind of like what I thought. And my depression did subside and go away, and I've never had like chronic depression since. It comes and goes, but it's not. It's never been to the point like it was back then.
Yeah.
I had kind of gotten to a point of acceptance with it that I realized this is what I'm doing now, but it's not what I'm going to do forever. And I kind of started. That's when I started being interested in photography, and I was like, what if I could become a photographer? I've seen other people around me do it, and it looks fun, and it's a creative thing, and I think I could make money doing this. So, long story short, or long story long, I should say, I basically just, when I got home from work, started teaching myself photography. I got a cheap camera. I had a really great friend who was kind of my mentor, and he taught me the ropes, and he was doing weddings and stuff and let me shadow him, and read a lot of Pinterest articles and YouTube videos and all that stuff. And by 2018, I had built up a photography business that was strong enough that along with another part-time job at a small furniture store, which was pretty like low key, between that and photography, I was able to quit my my desk job.
Yay,
And
that's awesome.
yes, it was great. And I kind of thought, like, oh my gosh, my entire quality of life is going to be better. All of my problems are going to go away.
I know where this is going.
Yep. And in some ways that was true. And like I was saying a lot, like around that time, this is like fall of 2018, I was like, the grass really is greener on the other side, you know? I suddenly had freedom in my life, and I was self-employed and could do what I want. But yes, as you know, like my mind was still the same. My struggles were still the same. So, and in a way, in some ways, things got worse. So with having ADHD, I respond well to people like authority telling me what to do, because I am very like guilt and fear based, like, okay, I have to get it done or else I will get fired. But now I have to be doing 100% of the executive functioning for myself and being my own boss and managing my own time. No one's telling me when I have to work, or when I'm off, you know? So, so that kind of started a new chapter in my, and I had all this performance anxiety from photography. So it was like now I had this new chapter where like I'm happier than I've ever been with my work, but at the same time, like anxiety is rising, and what I know now were ADHD symptoms were like going through the roof. So, so then since then, it's just kind of been this like journey of figuring out what environment creatively is really best for me, what job is really best for me, so where I'm not working against my brain and working against what I struggle with, and I'm actually like using my strengths and hacking my life to be more conducive for like the way that I work best, if that makes sense.
Oh, it 100% makes sense. And obviously your business, really, I think you just had your first like real opening, right? Like recently,
Yeah.
like within the last week, right?
Yeah, just like, yeah, last week, I think it was last Monday, just did open my Etsy for the first time, and there's still a few things on there at right now, but I am probably next week going to start getting more listings ready to do another restock, because I just have like pots all over my house that I just need to get rid of, just for space reasons. So yeah, so it's still very brand new.
Oh, I'm sure. And so I have to ask you, because I know we're running out of time, but I really want to know what was on that list of things that Pottery has taught you, because you already nailed, like, you already have that one that was really, really good, and now I'm curious as to what else is on that list.
So things that working with clay has taught me, we have to be centered, in quotes, by God before we can be used by Him. And the reason I said that is because when you're working with clay, when you first put it on the wheel, the potter is going to work on getting that clay perfectly centered before you can actually start building what you're going to build. Otherwise, it will collapse. It'll be really off. It won't function properly. And that process of centering clay can look really violent, depending on how many issues are in the clay, meaning like inconsistencies, air bubbles, what have you. So it's a really interesting metaphor. Like when you're doing it and it's fighting you, it's like we have a tendency to like fight God and like wrestle with Him, and if we just gave in to what His hands were doing, He would put us into a position that's much more like productive for us. So and that's exactly what happens with clay, you know. So yeah, we have to be centered by God before we can be used by Him. Another thing I had was, just like clay, people can change. You know, clay starts as sand becomes mud when you add some water. When you add a wheel, or even not a wheel, even just a person's hands, it can become a vessel. And then even once it becomes a vessel, it can be broken down back into clay again and be reworked into something else. So it can change. It can change forms, and so can people. Failure is beautiful and necessary. That's what I mentioned earlier. With clay, every pot you see, it's 1 out of, 500. And there's been, 10 failures for every one successful piece. And I love that part of the process. And it's kind of like taught me to stop, like, it's kind of broken perfectionism within me, because you can't do pottery and be a perfectionist.
Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's like, it will, and if you go to the wheel with like on a bad day, like if I go to the wheel on a bad day where I'm like, I am not being kind to myself and I'm in a bad mood or whatever, like I won't be able to throw a single thing. Like I won't be able to make anything. It's amazing how like your emotions come out when you're doing it. And I've just kind of learned, like, okay, if I make something and it flops, then it flops, and I learned something from it. So it's beautiful and necessary, and you just have to like get through those like flops, and then eventually you're going to create something beautiful.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm writing that down, and I have a feeling like that's going to show up on my Instagram page at one point. Yay! So I'll give you full credit. Don't worry, but that is amazing.
Yeah, no, feel free. Yeah. So it's just like a really cool art form that it's the first time that I feel like the creative thing that I'm doing is also helping me heal, and like it's like benefiting me emotionally as well as like fulfilling me with like a job and a creative outlet. So I've really enjoyed it. And I don't want to take up too much time, but like I've got like 3 more. I've got masterpieces can be born from humble materials. So just like mud can become this like amazing, beautiful thing. And so can like, bad life situations. And then until you endure fire, your faith won't hold water. So clay, is porous until it's been fired twice. So like it has to go through a lot of abuse and like hard stuff before it is actually something that can like hold anything. And I think people are like that too. And the last thing I have is clay is basically just learn from it, smash it, and then start over. So because like a lot of you, to be a potter, you have to be willing to smash work that's just not working, or be willing to just like throw it in the trash and then start over. So that's my little soapbox. Wow. And I could keep going, but it's just like, it's such a cool art form.
Oh, it is amazing, and I love watching your behind-the-scene videos of you actually working with the clay. I mean, there's this, like, just fascinating part of, especially when you kind of do almost like a time lapse, and you see it go up, and you're like, oh, it's becoming a pot, and then all of a sudden you're kind of like breaking it down again, and you're like, oh no, it's a cup. No, oh wait, no, it's turning into a vase. I'm pretty sure she's making a vase. No, it is a ball of clay again. Okay, I'm so confused and stuff, but it's mesmerizing. I love it.
Isn't it cool? Oh, I love watching pottery videos. It is so fun, and anyone can do it. Like, you just have to be willing to like put in the work and not get frustrated when things don't go how you plan, which is hard. But yeah, it's a very like mesmerizing process. It's super fun, and I will hopefully, even though I know we were talking about earlier about social media being like hard to keep up with, I am trying my best to like keep posting behind the scenes videos, because I know like it is like fun for people to see.
It is fun, and just so you know, I'm inviting myself to your studio so that I can do pottery with you one of these days. I think that would be so much fun. Like, I'm so curious. I want to get my hands dirty, and I want you to just like show me the basics of what it is that you do, because I'm
100%.
I'm absolutely fascinated, and it sounds like fun.
Okay, let's actually do that, because I would love to give a like private lesson, and we can like videotape it or something. It'd be
Oh my
really fun.
gosh, that's great. 100% that's going to happen. All of you listeners, stay tuned, because we're going to have some new amazing content, and I'm going to get my hands dirty. And honestly, I just love the metaphor that is for life, because life is messy,
Yeah.
life is dirty, but it doesn't mean that
Yeah.
it's not good too.
Yes, it's totally worth it. Yeah, it is a wealth of just like so many metaphors. It's awesome.
So cool. Okay, well, we can talk about that forever, but we are going to wrap up right now with one final question, and that is, obviously, you know that Drawanna's platform is all about creating a life that you love while also battling mental health issues. And so, what advice do you have for people who do face mental health challenges, but who really do want to keep trying to create that life that they love too?
Yeah, I think the main advice I would give is really sit down and ask yourself what like brings me energy, and what makes me like, what is a time that I did something and I just felt really alive when I was doing it, or right after I had done it. And then once you figure out what that thing is, then say, how can I change my environment or change my day-to-day to include more of that? So it might mean changing a job. It might mean moving to a different, city. It might mean just waking up an hour earlier or staying up an hour later to do that thing. And I think the more like you have that time and that environment that works with you, it suddenly like opens up an entire like life that is much more like enjoyable, and I think like mentally healthy. So I think that'd be my biggest piece of advice. That's not always easy to follow, because obviously like changing jobs or moving or something big, like if you realize you have to make a big change, that can be really scary, but it's definitely 100% worth it to create that life where you're really being used in the way that you were created to be used by God.
Oh, I couldn't have said it better myself. I 100% agree with that. And now, I said that was my last question. I was kidding. One more question. Can you tell everyone where they can find you and connect with you on social media, whether you want to give Willow and Vessel's Instagram handle or your personal one, both, whichever you want to share. I'll also make sure to add that to the description of this podcast episode so that people can then find you that way as well. And hopefully we can just continue to grow our community.
Yeah. So my Pottery page on Instagram is just Willow and Vessel. And then my personal page, I do post like poetry and things like that. So some other and that's really where I talk more about like mental health stuff right now. So that is Hannie, HANNIE, I think it's an underscore, and then Jane 07. I think that's correct.
Okay, I'm looking at it now on my computer. You're right.
Yeah. So if they want to follow me on there, great. But yeah, Willow and Vessel is my Pottery page. And I'm probably going to start talking more about my mental health journey with that as well, because it's definitely relevant.
And that's how they can also find your Etsy shop, right? Too?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, and there's a link to my Etsy on the Instagram, the Willow and Vessel Instagram.
Perfect. Well, Hannah, I cannot believe how much time has passed, and I have loved every single minute of it. No, do not ever apologize for that. This has been amazing and so life-giving. I was kind of having a little bit of a rough day. I didn't get much sleep last night, and work was really stressful yesterday, and I was kind of just like, oh no, like what if I can't bring the energy? And then from the moment you answered the phone, I was like, no, I am vibing with her. Like, I feel so much joy, so thank you for being here.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I love what you're doing. Keep it up. Like, you're doing amazing. I love everything that you post, and it's really encouraging, and you're starting conversations that everyone really needs to hear. So I love it.
Thank you for listening to the Drawn Podcast, empowering women battling anxiety, depression, and other mental illnesses, where I believe we've been drawn together to create a life we love. You can find more amazing content at my website, KatieRochetco.com, or follow me on Instagram at The Drawn Collection.